I got it quiet. Good morning, everybody.
Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great South Side. Get ready now for 30 minutes.
Morning, everybody. While I wait to see if the chat is working today. Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Morning, Geraldine. Everybody, we are live from Iowa today. Hey, Mom. Hey, Martin. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Beth. Hey, Marty. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Katie, Lori, Ellen. Coming to you live from Jeff and Jessica's house. Hey, Ann. Hey, Susan. Hey, James. James from the excellent band May Haley's Grave. Alright, shutting down the mail, so if anybody has tech support problems, too bad. Hey, Mary. Hey, Libby. Morning, Gail. Hey, Gabriel. Hey, Jean. Morning, Lori. Hey, Sari and Lynn in Kenosha. Okay, it's not totally just thought that name was Siri over here. Okay. Hey, Charlotte. Hey, Jordana. Hey, Christine. Hey, Mischa over on Twitch. Morning, Octavio. Hey, Colleen. Hey, Mona. Actually putting a theory into practice. Theoretically, I could do Chicago tours from anywhere when we're doing virtual, but I've never put that into practice. We've always broadcast from in Chicago. Hey, Octavio. Hey, Cherry. Hey, Susan. But I'm double vaxxed. My shoulders are waxed, ready to go. Hey, Donna. Hey, Carol. Hey, Susan. 2. Morning, Gary. Semper Fi. Hey, Diane. Morning all around. Hey, Candace. Morning, Betsy. And all Mysterians, of course. Hey, Kristen. That's always nice to realize you're not actually late for work. More JD and Georgia. Don't worry, I made sure there would be some Miles content.
That's what you call a powerhouse.
Morning Ghostly Podcast.
Earl Father Hines carries on now and presents Leroy Harris to sing Teacher's Pet.
Thanks, Denise and Ann. There'll probably be some bonus tours on my way back today, too. There's that Louis Sullivan Jewel Box Bank is in Grinnell. That's pretty much on the way home. There's also a great cemetery in Moline that I was planning to do for Find a Grave Friday on Friday, but then I realized I could make it all the way to Iowa City in time. Hey, Raquel. Hey, Andrea and Kathleen and Dina. Of course, Miles is not here, but we are joined by... There's a lovely dog named Duchess and a couple of toddlers running around. Hey, Jean. Morning, Libby. Morning, Dean. Morning, Jean. Hey, Helen. Hey, Cynthia. Hey, Donna. Hey, Kathy. Yeah, I finally got a haircut now that I'm fully vaxxed. And instead of I've been cutting it in the mirror all this time. The back was a mess. Actually, my hair looked like the Naked Trike Angel's hair. Hey, Susan. Morning, Robert. Hey, Rebecca. In sunny Joliet. Not sunny in Iowa right now. Hey, Elaine. Nice and foggy here in West Des Moines. Hey, Joanne, this is Father Earl Hines playing live at the Grand Terrace which is still standing, though now it's a beauty shop down on 35th Street in Bronzeville. Hey, Megan. Hey, Bob. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, that was my first, like, public appearance in over a year yesterday, so I got my regular outfit on. Hey, my formal, the closest I get to formal wear. Hey, Gene. Hey, Mary. Well, Octavio, carefully trimming so it didn't look like I had a mullet or anything. Good morning, Tim, over on YouTube. Hey, Eileen. Hey, Donna. Hey, Charlotte. Hey, Zap.
Faithful seat a slap and carry on in jive. Hi-ho, Silver!
Hey, Amy in Ottumwa. I mostly knew Ottumwa as a kid because there would be like, in Ottumwa, turn to channel 64 for a better reception of TV8. Ellen, a good place to stay in Chicago? I can only help so much. I like the Athletic Association Hotel, but I don't really stay in Chicago hotels. Today is H.H. Holmes' birthday. Well, I wouldn't say happy birthday to the guy. Yeah, Susan, I am coming to you live from West Des Moines today, the home of Jeff and Jessica. If you saw Whiskey and a Cookie on Friday. Oh, which they were terrific. Hey, Toby. Morning, Nancy and Susan and Eleanor. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Miguel. The sheer number of names out there that my phone thinks I'm saying Siri. Hey, Sherilyn. Hey, Donna. Hey, Bart. Hey, Lorena. I hope you like it, Cassie. Added a couple new things into this. I've been on the road, so I haven't updated as much as I normally would. Hey, Kathleen and Ava. Hey, Rose. And we'll stop at I'll stop at least one place on the way back. It probably won't be as long of a post-tour hang as we normally do. But I'll make it up to you guys. We're going to be stopping to some cool places on the way back. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, John and Lisa, Linda. Octavio, I am, and don't call me Shirley. Now, that's a movie that's still funny, Airplane. A lot of 70s movies that were hilarious then are kind of funny now. That one's got like this universal high school skit Mad Magazine vibe that just still works. Doesn't totally hold up, but a lot of it still, I was still laughing a lot at it. Hey Trisha, hey Lynn, hey Lori. Kathy, no grinder yet, but I'm still intending to get one before I get out of town. Hey Jenny. Eleanor, I agree. Hey, Liz. I gotta learn the songs on this one. Hey, Tato. Well, this one I didn't get like a copyright claim like I sometimes do on the Benny Goodman one. Never on Facebook, but now that it's going on YouTube and stuff, it is also nice to mix things up. Thanks, Sarah. Good to see you yesterday. Hey, Lisa. And Lisa. And Mandy and Paula and Kathy. Hey, Kristen and Rock you. Zap, today's music is Father Hines live at the Grand Terrace, which was featured on the Bronzeville tour the other day. Barbara, I'm at a friend's house in West Des Moines today, so I'm on the road for a statue dedication yesterday. I'll be heading back later, but don't worry, we do have some Miles content here. Morning, Susan in Hollywood. Oh yeah, after the statue thing, they served these apple chicken bratwursts. at the party, and it was delicious. I've had a lot of good bratwurst over the course of this weekend. Hey, Donna. Morning, Phyllis. 86 there, keep it. Temperature's over 75, ought to retire. Morning, Cindy in rainy Detroit. We'll give this song one. We'll let him go through a little more song here. Earl Father Hines. Becky. Heather, yes, I will definitely do a shout out for the cemetery cleanup. October 3rd at 9:30. We'll be seeing the section of it here at Oak Woods over the course of the tour. But yeah, the Mysterians are organizing a cool cemetery cleanup. Hey, Heidi and Catlin. Morning, Barbara in the Quad Cities. Hey, Joanne. Everybody, of course. Give it another minute or so for people to log on. People tend to show up, like, right at 10 o'clock. Morning, Laura. Well, you know, I'm a tour guide by nature. I just love to tell people what to look at and show off cool stuff. So it's about a 5.5 hour drive. 5.5. Greetings, Mary in Nashville and Linda in Boston. The Tavern in Valley Junction. Okay, Mom. I was thinking of Felix and Oscars. Morning, Patty. Becky, this is Earl Hines, also known as Father Hines. Hey, Tim and Georgette and Morton Grove over on YouTube. Hey, Diane and Chris. We'll give it to the end of this particular song, which sounds like it. Nah, this Earl playing the piano. Miguel, no, I don't really cover people that recent in general. I have a too soon rule because I just have such a tendency to be a smart aleck about everything. Hey, Gina in Jensen Beach, Florida. Thanks for sending me that picture. I promise I will keep it private. Sorry I haven't responded yet. I've been on the road. Hey, Sue. Hey, Mary. Oh, yeah, still on the road. There is a little bit of Miles content, though, so don't worry about it. I'll have another video at the end of Miles. I know what you guys really come here for. As soon as Earl wraps up this song. They used to say that Earl must have sold his soul to the devil to get that third hand playing the piano, because he couldn't have done it with two.
Well, we're about halfway through the jive concert by Earl Father.
All right, it's okay. That's when we end this one, when the announcer says we're halfway through this jive concert. That would have been really fairly new slang at the time in 1928 when that was recorded. All right, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours, coming to you live today for a virtual tour from West Des Moines, Iowa, the home of my friends Jeff and Jessica. If you watched the Whiskey and a Cookie episode, they were the people who came on here and were just absolutely fantastic. So anyway, I've been a tour guide and historian in Chicago for about 15 years. I'm on the road this weekend, but it's a virtual tour. I can broadcast from anywhere with good enough Wi-Fi. I've been a tour guide for about 15 years. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, the now rare collectors, I Am the Ghost of Chicago. I'm on the History Travel and Smithsonian channels all the time, so I am incredibly famous. You should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. Today we are going to talk about Oakwood Cemetery, which is down on the south side of Chicago, one of the three big private cemeteries in Chicago, the others being Rose Hill and Graceland. Now, from a manner of speaking, this was the first one. The paperwork was filled out for this one before Rose Hill and before Graceland, but the burials didn't start until way later. They filled out the paperwork to form this cemetery back in the 1850s, but burials did not really start here until after the Civil War. Now, let's go ahead and go right on in. One of the first things you see upon coming in is some cemeteries do this sort of thing and some of them don't. This is a relic of the Great Chicago Fire. And Oak Woods is actually very good about having like little monuments to Chicago history, just mixing things in, putting up tributes. Like there's a 9/11 tribute, there's stuff about the Great Chicago Fire. And here there is this relic of the Great Chicago Fire. It's probably all that was left of a building after everything melted in 1871. It's sort of similar to back behind the Chicago History Museum. And I guess they're going to make this easier to see now, but in this ring of bushes, this is all that was left of a store after the fire. Everything just kind of melted. So right above here, we are on. I always get a kick out of the fact that the pretend cemetery streets. This one is Sunset Boulevard. Now, there are some fairly strict rules here at Oakwood Cemetery. You can see no loud music, service dogs only, no alcohol, no illegal substances. That should probably just be covered by them being illegal to start with. And it also says no barbecuing. However, right on the pond, they have a special spot set up with a whole barbecue grill. So I don't think their entire, I guess they just don't mean don't barbecue anywhere other than the place that we have specifically set aside for barbecuing. There's a lot of interesting old stories about superstitions at this place. In about the 1890s, there was a story going around that many mornings the caretakers would show up here. On the other side of the fence, they would find a bunch of candles. These candles would have been lit, but then immediately snuffed out and dropped over the fence. Sometimes it was just one, sometimes it was a bundle of 3 or 4. It must have been some kind of superstition, but they could never quite figure out which one. And in 1912, there was a terrific story. A guy was walking past an unfenced part of the cemetery. Somebody jumped out of behind the tombstone to mug him. He said, if I thought it was just a mugger, I might have fought the guy. But he thought it was a ghost, so he ran all the way to the police station. Now, we're at the edge of the pond here. On the other end of the pond is a pretty cool plot. It's not every day that you see a tombstone with the word tombstone on it. This is Elmo Tombstone Williams, who was a gravestone carver here in Chicago. He actually had this storefront not too far away, Elmo's Tombstone Service. Before you go, call Elmo. He said that he could carve a tombstone in about 60 minutes. And I think the operation is still in existence. They like to do things by hand. They say that the laser cut gravestones that are a lot more common now just aren't going to last quite as long. But let's move on right into the real meat of the tour and see some of the notable people here. Down at the edge of the pond, probably the largest monument here. It's something about Chicago mayors. They always want to have the biggest obelisk in the cemetery. In the case of Long John Wentworth, it was before Sigmund Freud. Big Bill Thompson, it was after. Now, Big Bill Thompson was, by most accounts, the absolute worst mayor we ever had in Chicago, which of course is saying something. He was mayor during the 1920s, during the gangster era. By some accounts, Al Capone had a picture of this guy up on the wall. He ended up making an absolute fool of himself. When he was running for re-election, he announced there was going to be a debate between him and the 2 other candidates. When the press arrived, they found just Bill, and instead of the other candidates, he had rats with name tags of the other candidates, and actually debated the rats. During his re-election campaign, his big thing was coming out strong against the King of England. He was on a mission. He said he was going to purge all of the pro-British textbooks out of the school libraries. He said that if he ever met the King of England, he would punch him in the snoot. This was all really trying to ingratiate himself to primarily the Irish voters, but he made an absolute fool of himself. And I always like to bring up the Chicago Tribune's paper. Now, he was a Republican mayor, and the Chicago Tribune was a Republican paper, but when he was voted out of office, they say it is... He saw us as an enemy, and the Tribune was glad to earn that opinion. It certainly tried to do so. It has taken the fight to him on every occasion during the long and depraved course of his administration. It is unpleasant business to eject a skunk, but someone has to do it. For Chicago, Thompson has meant filth, corruption, obscenity, idiocy, and bankruptcy. He has given the city an international reputation for moronic buffoonery, barbaric crime, triumphant hoodlumism, unchecked graft, and a dejected citizenship. He nearly ruined the property and completely destroyed the pride of the city. He made Chicago a byword for collapse of American civilization. In his attempt to continue this, he excelled himself as a liar and defamer of character. He's out. I always feel like I need a cigarette after that. I'll settle for a sip of Starbucks. Now, we're around the back of his monument right here. This is actually his father, William Hale Thompson Sr., who, as you can see, had the absolute best facial hair in Chicago history. I also like the epaulettes that make him look like Captain Crunch. He could very well have been the model for Captain Crunch here, but he's got those, like... You look at pictures of President Chester A. Arthur and think, now that's some good facial hair. Colonel Will Thompson is like, hold my beer. But we also have one of our have a better mayor just up the plot from him. Just up the edge is Harold Washington. Our first black mayor. He had one of the great slogans. He said, you used to go around the country and people would say, Chicago, Al Capone. Now they say, Chicago, how's Harold? He was elected in the early 1980s, served just over one term. He was reelected but died of a heart attack just months into his second term. His time in office was marked largely by fighting with the city council that didn't want to do what he said. There was a whole clique of aldermen led by Ed Burke, who is still around and still being kicked around, who just refused to enact anything that Harold Washington wanted to do. One thing I'll criticize him for is he's the one who canceled the 1992 World's Fair that we were supposed to have. Really, there just wasn't the money for it, and the city just wasn't supporting it. But I still feel like we'd have a lot more to talk about if we had gone ahead and had that fair, even though we probably would have lost money on it. Places were losing money on their World's Fairs by then. But elsewhere along the pond, you can see Thompson in the background here. There's a guy whose story comes up on a number of different tours. Right up over here is Calvin DeWolf. Now, Calvin DeWolf was part of the tightly knit group of abolitionists that we had in Chicago back in the 1850s and 1860s. In particular, in 1860... Sorry. Sorry, the case he's best remembered for is in 1860, a woman named Eliza Grayson escaped from slavery in Nebraska. Now, slavery was not that well established in Nebraska. It was part of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, but her escaping probably meant the population of enslaved people in Nebraska was down by about 10%. But she got a job as a domestic in a house of ill repute here and spoke a little too loudly about her scenario. A couple of the women who worked in the house wrote back to a guy named Stephen Knuckles, her enslaver. Of all, Stephen Knuckles, what a name. And said, hey, we've got Eliza here. Come back and get her and give us a reward. So Eliza tried to escape again. Stephen got a hold of her, but as a crowd formed around, Calvin DeWolf, who knew what was going on, was aware of this sort of stuff, had both of them arrested. And that might sound like, well, how could he arrest her for escaping from slavery? It was kind of a trick. He locked them up in separate cells. So Knuckles would still be under lock and key as he helped Eliza escape. Now, we don't really know what happened to Eliza Grayson after this. It's very common with Underground Railroad stories that, especially if the subject got away, we don't necessarily know what happened with them later. Stephen Knuckles went back to Nebraska. He's got a park named after him there. But there's quite a number of Underground Railroad people at Oakwood Cemetery. Also, a lot of people who are known to have been born enslaved. It's hard to track them down, though. It's they're not as free with their records here. So I'm always looking for more of these stories. But right here we've got, this is one of my favorite guys to talk about, Charles Volney Dyer, who dissected the first man hanged in Chicago, appeared in about every major Chicago history story over the next generation or so. He's one of the guys that I describe as like a Forrest Gump character in Chicago history. But also, he was known around the country as the unofficial president of the Underground Railroad. He was involved in a lot of those sort of cases. The one I like telling the most is the one where he had a guy that was staying at his house until he could make the trip to Canada. And one day, some slave catchers came to town, kidnapped the guy, and brought him down to the Mansion House Hotel. So Dr. Dyer was having his breakfast when one of his clerks came running in and saying, Dr. Dyer, they've got that guy you were helping. They've got him tied up in the Mansion Hotel. So Dyer took his cane, busted into the guy's room, and they shouted, Sir, you are interfering with our domestic institutions. To which Dyer took his cane and said, oh yeah, well, you're interfering with my breakfast, and broke the cane over their head. Now, I kind of doubt the story went down exactly like that. That's the way it was remembered. That's the way it was retold at the time. It's just a little too Indiana Jones to be real. But other abolitionists got together and bought him a new cane to replace the one he had broken over the slave catcher's head. That cane is still in the collection of the Chicago History Museum. They don't keep it on display, but they've assured me that they do still have it in their warehouse someplace. Now, let's move a little bit further south down here on this other end of the pond. So, I said earlier there was this tombstone, before you go, call Elmo. It's always a good idea if you want to have control over how you're remembered and how you're memorialized. You got to take care of that ahead of time. Even if you write it into your will, people don't necessarily follow it. So here we have Roland Burris, who was our senator briefly for a while. He's the person who was appointed to take over Obama's seat. And among his other accomplishments here, first African American to be Illinois State Attorney General, Illinois State Comptroller, Vice President of the Continental Illinois National Bank. It is worth noting, of course, that Roland Burris is not dead. He's got this terrific mausoleum for himself and his wife. I think it's terrific that he's taken this much of an interest in how he will be memorialized and remembered. It doesn't mention the Senate yet here. I think he needs to update it a little bit. But also right next to him, he's got this prime triangle location. But just over from here on the side of the pond is Jesse Owens. Now, Burris, I'm afraid, is always going to be a little bit overshadowed by Jesse Owens, whatever accomplishments he can add here. Jesse Owens, of course, won 4 gold medals in the 1936 Berlin Olympic Games, the most successful person there. And this was the one that Hitler had specifically planned to use this as a showcase for the Aryan race. But here's a little bit of footage. There's actually some footage of this.
In comes the most amazing performance by America's black streak Jesse Owens in the 100 meters.
And just look how far ahead he is of everybody
Makes the
else.
others look as if they're walking as he wins the final and equals the world's record time. This and his later victory.
Now, at the time, he was quick to point out, though, I won 4 gold medals, but when I came back to my native country, after all the stories about Hitler, I couldn't ride on the front of the bus. I had to go through the back door. I couldn't live where I wanted. I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler like most gold medal winners were, but I also wasn't invited to the White House either. Now, later on, President Ford gave him a Medal of Freedom, and George H.W. Bush, Bush the First, gave him a Medal of Honor, but that was about a decade after his death. Great an athlete as he was also a pack-a-day smoker, died in 1980 at the age of 66. Now, I actually have people in the comments quite often who met him while he lived in Chicago or while he was in the hospital. Nobody ever has a bad thing to say about him. Now, here's one I just been working on a little bit. You know, for an Iowa kid, an old Iowa kid like myself, I know nothing about farming. I know nothing about things like grain elevators. But over on the western edge of the cemetery is this monument to Ernst Barg, Wilbert Horner, Henry Crail, and Louis Kohlberg. These are 4 of the 8 people who were killed in a grain elevator explosion in 1939. It was the worst blaze in 8 years. It killed at least 8 people, injured a dozen firefighters. This was the Rosenbaum brothers' grain elevator at 102nd and Calumet. Now, grain elevators at the time, and probably still, were incredibly dangerous because of this dust. Dust from all of the grains that were being stored there would be invisible, so you couldn't see just how dense the dust would be inside of the place. Anything like a spark from an electrical wire or somebody lighting a cigarette was known to cause a huge explosion. This one in 1939 was the 10th big explosion in 18 years. Around the country, about 300 people had been killed in grain elevator explosions over about 20 years or so. This was the worst, just the worst one in a while. And it was a major story at the time. We actually have a couple of pictures of him. This is Louis Kohlberg, and this is Henry Crail, happened to be pictured the next day. Now, it burned so hot that they said the fire department said that as they tried to put it out, as soon as the water got towards the fire, it would evaporate. All that they could really do was let the thing burn out. Now, but also, I also want to point out the Citgo station that you can see in the background on the other side of Cottage Grove. We're right about at 68th and Cottage Grove right here, which we were just playing before this. We were playing a 1928 radio broadcast. One thing I'd really like to get a copy of is the Granada Cafe, stood about where that was. WBBM used to broadcast live from the Granada Cafe in 1928, and one day they might have even broadcast a murder. Now, while a band was playing, some gunmen came in, some gunmen from the Chicago mob came in and shot Stubby McGovern and Gunner McFadden. By most accounts, in the view of hundreds of witnesses while the band played, and apparently while the radio was broadcasting. There were conflicting reports at the time over whether you could actually hear the gunshots during the broadcast. WBBM insisted that it happened at a time when the radio broadcast, when the microphone wasn't on, but dozens of people were calling into the paper the next day insisting that they had heard the whole thing happen. No recording of this ever seems to have surfaced, so we don't really know for sure. My guess is they probably weren't really broadcasting and people just heard a drum beat or something and thought that they were hearing it the next day. It's the kind of thing that happens now and then. Everybody swears that they saw it, even though it didn't really happen. It's just such a vivid image in your mind that you feel like you were there. But there's plenty of gang stories here in the cemetery, including one of my favorites that'll probably come up next Sunday on the Unsolved Mysteries tour. Might cover this in a bit more detail. Chicago in the 1920s was known for our massive, massive gangster funerals. You know, thousands and thousands of people lining the section. One of the first really big ones was Big Jim Colosimo. Now, Big Jim was one of the vice lords of Chicago in the 1910s. If you ran a gambling operation or a numbers racket or a house of ill repute or something like that, there's a pretty good chance that you were paying off a tribute to Big Jim, who ran Colosimo's Cafe on Wabash Street. Here he is with his first wife, Victoria. But then in 1920, he left her and married one of the singers in the cafe, a young woman named Dale. So nobody really knows for sure what happened here, but so apparently after he married her, he told everybody, you know, Prohibition started, the bootleg liquor thing starting up, but I just got married again. I don't want to get involved in stuff like that, so we are not going to do bootleg liquor here in Chicago. We'll stew to the girls in the gambling houses and stuff, but no bootleg liquor, not on my watch. This, of course, made him a target, and he was shot to death right in his cafe by assailants unknown. Reporters later said that everybody knew that everybody in town knew who did it, but even then they wouldn't elaborate. Sometimes it's been rumored that it was Al Capone himself, and this helped cement his reputation as a tough guy, even back when he was just a lieutenant for John Torrio, who took over for Colosimo. But here's where it gets weird. We're gonna do some tomb snooping here, putting the camera right in between the bars to look at the slab. Focus. Now, if you can look here, it says James Colosimo, 1870 to 1919, which is weird because there's absolutely no controversy about the fact that he was killed in 1920, not in 1919. But typos on gravestones are way more common than you would think. In this case, I can just imagine the guy, you know, doing the carving. Oh, crap. Well, who's ever going to see it? And who is ever going to see it, except that we're still talking about it now 101 years later. In fact, this month, I believe, is the anniversary of it. It's just been now 101 years since Big Jim was killed. We've also got another gangster right up over here. Now, this is from the Capone mob. Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik. They say that Greasy Thumb, so named because he was the guy who was kind of the fixer, the bookkeeper who greased all of the rails, greased all of the palms. But he overheard a plot to murder Capone and ratted the people out. That really got him into Capone's good graces. He became the treasurer and financial guru of the outfit. And he outlived most of them. He died of a heart attack at the age of 69, making him one of very few major gangsters to get anywhere close to the 70. Now, he was also a Jewish, we tend to separate the mob. We think of Capone as the Italian mob, Moran as, on the north side, as the Irish mob. Really, it wasn't quite that clean. It was more about who lived in the neighborhood with you. This is, Greasy Thumb was actually Jewish. They said that when he died, there were more Italians in the synagogue than there had ever been before. And down on the south end of the cemetery is an old Jewish section that isn't technically controlled by Oak Woods or by Dignity Memorial. This was a cemetery for 3 or 4 Southside synagogues, all of which have moved away now and none of which have any members that still have anybody here. So it's kind of become overgrown. So this is where we're going to be doing a cleanup effort on October 3rd. If you can find the Mysterious Chicago Regulars page on Facebook, October 3rd at 9:30 a.m., we're not going to be touching any of the headstones. That's dangerous. But we're going to be working on some of the weeding and some of the gardening and just trying to clean this up a little bit. Now, the synagogues still have control over it, and they do try to make cleanup efforts occasionally, but they're also dealing with things like being firebombed, and they have to prioritize the needs of the living, of course. The most prominent one inside of here is the Selig Morris Mausoleum. Selig Morris was in the iron and metal business. Let's move out of here a little bit. This is actually the landmark that I used to find this other space. Somebody mentioned earlier today is the birthday of H.H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City guy. Now, as you know, I did a whole biography on this guy. One of my favorite bits of research in it was about Dr. Holton. One of the stories you hear about Holmes in just about every book about him is when he first came to Chicago, he got a job working in Dr. Holton's pharmacy. Dr. E.S. Holton, who was an old man slowly dying, while his poor hapless wife tried to run the pharmacy herself. so she was only too happy to hire this energetic young go-getter with the incredible mustache, H.H. Holmes. And then shortly thereafter, the Holtons disappeared. Holmes announced that he was now the owner of the pharmacy, and the Holtons had moved off to California, and they were never seen again. It's always broadly implied that he must have killed them. Now, here's the thing, though. There was a period in 1895 where people were accusing Holmes of having murdered anyone they hadn't seen for 2 weeks. And they never mentioned the Holtons. There was some talk of him having worked for them, but not of them being missing at the time. So I did some digging, finally found out that the doctor was not an old man. She was a young woman. That's right, the doctor was a woman. What? Dr. Elizabeth Holton was only a couple of years older than Holmes. She had been at the University of Michigan just a short while before he was there, so they probably actually knew each other through mutual friends. And you can see that she lived well into the 1930s. William, her husband, died in 1910. Now, one of the more curious things about this to me, honestly, was just that why wasn't anybody interviewing her at the time? And the reason may be, you can see Abby over here. On the left, that was her daughter who had died just before the Holmes story broke, before the investigation started, so she might have not been in any shape to talk about these things. Now, there is at least one serial killer victim that I know of here, one of our antique mustachioed serial killers. Johann Hawk, the last woman he murdered in Chicago was a woman named Marie Walker. He met her through a candy store, started giving her arsenic almost immediately. She's buried somewhere at Oak Woods, but I'm not sure where. She was disinterred to see how much arsenic there was in her body after Hawk was captured, and the arsenic would still be there, too. There's probably a few other people here connected to him. It's a fun thing about Johann Hawk is that if somebody wants to do some real forensics, the arsenic is still there. Arsenic is an element. It doesn't degrade down to anything else. So the trouble was there was arsenic and embalming fluid in those days. That's why he kept getting away with it. Except in Marie's case, they hadn't been using arsenic anymore. So he hadn't been following the advances in the embalming arts and sciences. That was the murder for which he was hanged. He'll come up again in more detail on Thursday night on the Antique Serial Killers Tour. Now, from the Holtons, we can move just down here a little ways. This is one of the longer walks of this, so give me a chance to take a quick sip of coffee here. Kristen, the picture of Hawk on a shirt, I bet I can make that happen. And that's from a Chicago American from like 1905. That's public domain by now. The Chicago American loved talking about Johann Hawk. They would print any rumor that they could dream up about him. And it also gave them a chance to rehash the H.H. Holmes stories. They came up with this idea that maybe he was a guy who worked for Holmes originally. Some people still insist that it was true. If you read through all of their reporting, it's pretty clear that it was not. But right over here, in the background, you can see the most controversial part of the cemetery, the Confederate monument for Confederate prisoners of war who died here in Chicago. Up in front of it, lesser known, is the cenotaph for Southern abolitionists. And this was, let me just read this. This is a cenotaph, a gravestone for people not buried there. To those unknown heroic men once resident in the Southern states, martyrs for human freedom, who at the breaking out of the Civil War refused to be the traitors to the Union, who without moral or material support stood alone among ruthless enemies, and after unspeakable suffering either died at their post of duty, or abandoning home and possessions sought refuge and scant bread for their families among strangers at the North. To those pure patriots who without bounty, without pay, without pension, without honor, went to their graves without recognition even by their country, this stone is raised and inscribed after 30 years waiting by one of themselves, an exiled abolitionist. So, neo-Confederate dorks absolutely hate this thing. And of course, that's why I love it. You know, we forget there were plenty of people, you didn't want to say out loud in the South that you were an abolitionist. That was dangerous. When South Carolina seceded, their governor issued a message saying the first order of business was a new law punishing summarily and severely, if not with death, any man who avows himself an abolitionist. Down in Texas, there had been some droughts that caused wildfires. They tended to blame the wildfires on abolitionists. A lot of people were lynched because of that. But we'll move just beyond the cenotaph a bit. And just touch briefly on the fact that Camp Douglas, our Confederate prisoner of war camp, had several thousand people died. They were eventually moved down to this mass grave here. And Most places where they have a lot of Confederate monuments, the ultimate goal is to move it to a cemetery. In this case, at least, it's already in the cemetery. And what I'll tell myself is these weren't like officers or anything. These were mostly kids who had been manipulated, lied to, drafted, and sent off to die. Well, you can't really blame the soldiers for the war in all cases. But it's interesting that right in view of that monument, you can see it in the background here, is the mausoleum of John Johnson. Now, John Johnson, who was the first black man to appear on the Forbes 400. He was born in Arkansas in 1926, came to Chicago after his parents took him to the 1933 World's Fair. Now, I wish I could have talked to him just about the 33 fair. When I was first starting out in this business, I met a lot of people who had been at that fair. And in fact, yesterday I did the dedication for a statue that used to be at the mall. And the process of that, I interviewed the guy who had been the developer behind that mall, and he told me about going to the World's Fair and told me the same thing I hear from every little kid who went to the World's Fair. They puked on the midway after eating too many donuts, and their father got in a lot of trouble for seeing Sally Rand the fan dancer. But John's story was his parents came up to Chicago and thought, wow, this is a lot better than Arkansas. There's going to be a lot more opportunities for our son John here. So he ended up going to high school with Nat King Cole, ended up becoming the founder of Ebony and Jet magazine. Now, what he considered his most important thing in the work on that magazine was in 1955, Emmett Till was murdered down south. He was attacked, brutally beaten, and lynched. And his mother asked for the picture to run in the magazine of his body, unembalmed just as it was, just to show people the horrors of what was going on. The murderers were clearly guilty and later pretty well admitted it, but they were acquitted almost immediately. Lynching was not a federal crime at the time. It was just tried in the local courts. And in fact, lynching is still not a federal crime. But right up elsewhere in the cemetery is history's probably the most famous anti-lynching advocate, Ida B. Wells, who wrote the pamphlet, the Southern Horror of the Lynch Law. I can't remember the exact title. I screwed that up. We showed it just the other night when we showed her house on the Bronzeville tour. But Ida B. Wells came to Chicago in 1893, partly because she was under a lot of threat down in Memphis where she had been living. People in Memphis did not take kindly to anti-lynching advocates. But she came here primarily also to protest the 1893 World's Fair, which was kind of known for its excluding people of color, especially black people. They made sure to have representatives to the fair from every state, from every organization, from every cultural group. When they realized they hadn't appointed anybody from Alaska, they quickly rectified that, but they didn't have any black representatives. Frederick Douglass was able to speak at the fair by becoming the representative for the government of Haiti. And eventually the fair tried to make things better by having what they called Negro Day, on which Ida B. Wells herself was really rather iffy. Douglass decided it was best to just take advantage of the publicity for his activism. Wells was, I think, a little bit willing to defer to Frederick Douglass on that. But one thing they never commented on was a person who is now generally said to have been the most prominent black presence at the fair, though I think it's been wildly exaggerated recently, to the point that I was almost even hesitant to include this one on the tour. But over in the manufacturing exhibit, there was a pancake company that had a woman named Nancy Green playing Aunt Jemima. And after Nancy Green died, the Aunt Jemima company started publishing these pamphlets about how famous she had become, how well they had treated her. They were exaggerating this somewhat. She did appear at the fair. She did acquire some press attention at the time, but there were also people who noted, the most notable black presence at the 1893 World's Fair was a woman playing the role of an enslaved woman. But Nancy did make a living doing this and was fairly famous for it at the time. And recently it's become very controversial. People are holding her up as proof that they should hold on to the same advertising logo they had in the 1890s to this day. And I don't know why people get so attached to old-fashioned advertising logos, but very few of them keep them that long. But it is good that it has kept Nancy Green's memory alive and kept her in the news as well. Now, another World's Fair connection that we've got here, this is a lesser-known one, a guy by the name of Werner Kummel. Werner Kummel was an engineer who came to Chicago. He was an authority on gas and water works, and in 1892, he helped save Hamburg from the cholera epidemic. This was still an era when cities would get absolutely ravaged by cholera. So Having done so, he was invited to speak at the fair. He was all set to do so. Then he died in his hotel room. So the other engineers in town got together, pitched in, and threw him a funeral, got him a burial space here in Chicago, and a remarkably nice monument here at Oakwood Cemetery. And as I mentioned, they also have a lot of little shout-outs to Chicago history around the cemetery, like the fire relic from the beginning. There is also a monument here to the people who were killed in the cold storage fire. In July of 1893, right in the middle of the World's Fair, 12 firefighters and a few civilians, one of whom could never be identified, were killed when the cold storage building caught fire. Now, it seemed to have started up here in the cupola. It was a facade of wood that was painted. There was a wood facade painted over the smokestack to make it look more scenic. It also made it more flammable. A crowd of 30,000 people watched this happen. I'm running low on time already here. So let's move down just a little bit. Let's hear from Mr. Burns.
Jobs at the plant and have them play on our softball team. Honus Wagner, Cap Anson, Mordecai Three-Finger Brown.
Yeah, if you're starting a baseball team and you can get Cap Anson, just from a statistical point of view, you should probably get him. Cap Anson played 26-year career in the major leagues between 1871 and 1897. There's one of the baseball statistics out there is wins over record, the number of wins that your team probably added by having you on the team. And throughout the whole 1800s, Cap Anson was way ahead of everybody else. Like up until Babe Ruth, he was far and away the winner of that. So trouble with having him here is this guy was racist as hell. He refused to play exhibition games against black baseball players, helped to establish the color line in the early 20th century. And then after his baseball career, he started a bunch of businesses like a bowling alley. He tried to start his own baseball team, but he blew all of his money and ended up working on vaudeville, where he would hit papier-mâché balls into the crowds. Not too far from him, another baseball guy is the amusingly named Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who I can actually work into any number of Chicago history stories. He was a judge, worked in a lot of different cases that pop up. There was one where he went against where he was talking against Bugs Moran, a lot of things of that nature. He was named by his father, who had been wounded in the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. So against the objections of his family, he named him Kennesaw Mountain. Misspelled it too. There's supposed to be two N's in there, but after, in the 1910s or early 1920s, he was made commissioner for life of baseball to investigate the Black Sox scandal when it came out that several players for the Chicago White Sox in 1919 had lost on purpose after getting paid by gamblers to lose the World Series. Now, he's become controversial as well because the whole time that he was commissioner, the color line was going on in baseball. It was an all-white game. Now, he would say, it seems to have been kind of neutral on it. He would say when asked, there's no rule, I could not prevent it, my job is just to interpret and enforce the rules, but he also at the same time didn't really do anything to encourage the situation to change. But other people, I think, there's one book that criticized just saying, well, his name was Kennesaw Mountain, which, granted, sounds like something you would hear an ex-Confederate named, but that wasn't the case with him. And while we're kind of on the subject here, not too far away also is Ted Radcliffe, known as Double Duty because he played both pitcher and catcher. One newspaperman, Damon Runyon, said he was worth the price of 2 admissions to watch this guy play. Now, Ted Radcliffe played in the Negro Leagues. He started with the Chicago American Giants, ended up with the Homestead Grays. Here's a picture of him. Now, he played exhibition games against players like Ty Cobb, who is famously racist, but unlike Cap Anson, would at least play in these exhibition games. Now, he was Jackie Robinson's roommate for a while when he played for the Kansas City Monarchs, was the manager of the Chicago American Giants in 1950, and started hiring white players. This was 1950. The color line had been broken a few years before, and finding talent in the Negro Leagues was starting to get a little bit tricky. So, as all of the best players were getting snatched up to the major leagues. So, in 1999, you can see this guy lived to be 103. In 99, when he was 96 years old, he was brought in to make one pitch for the Schaumburg Flyers, the the minor league baseball team. That made him the oldest professional baseball player. And after that, every year he would throw one pitch a year for the Sox after the age of 100. Now, There's a picture of him right here. He is third from the right, kneeling. Back behind him is Josh Gibson, who, now that they're incorporating Negro League statistics into the Major League statistics, he now has the record for a single season batting average, 441 in 1943. Let's move on just a bit more here. I'm getting right about to the edge. There's a couple of monuments over here that I wish I could research more, but it's very hard to read the names here. They're not quite as open with me with their records and files as some of the others are. There are a number of Civil War people here. There's a nice statue of Lincoln. And off in the distance, kind of by that Sitco was, where the Granada radio murder happened, is a guy by the name of David Ayers, who won a Medal of Honor for his bravery in the Vicksburg campaign. Even though he survived it tremendously. There was a thing where Grant was organizing a party to go out to build a bridge across a moat and set up ladders on a Confederate fort. Now, this was a really dangerous mission, so much so that only single men were accepted to volunteer for it because they figured most of them were likely going to die. About 150 of them signed up, and about half of them were killed. The rest got medals, though they didn't come anywhere close to completing building the bridge. Captain David Ayers lived another more than 50 years after that. He was one of the survivors. And there's just a couple of other cool ones that I'll show off before we finish up. This is Oscar Spindler, who just has a magnificent gravestone. I love the statue work there. And he was the inventor of this kind of light fixture. This is from the patent paperwork. And also the one from the beginning. I wish that we knew more about this person. This is Kate Tiffany Richardson. And about all I can tell, all that we really know about Kate was that she died in 1890 at the age of 40. Her husband, Orlo, was a carpet dealer. There's this terrific thing from the Davenport newspaper when she got married. Did just right. Like sensible people determined on future happiness, our young friend O.W. Richardson and the accomplished Miss Kate Tiffany sought the services of Reverend Mr. Lamb yesterday afternoon and were married. It is a noble example and worthy of emulation. We congratulate them. May their wedding tour be delightful and the long and rugged pathway of life be strewn with flowers of unfading love, garlands of happiness, and satisfactory packages of greenbacks. Love that. All right, so at this point, I want to go ahead and plug some of the upcoming tours. Now, of course, also there'll be a couple of them this afternoon. I plan to pull off of the interstate and show off a couple of points of interest for some bonus mini tours. But Thursday night, one of our signature, most popular ones for the first time in January, antique serial killers in Chicago history. We tend to think of birthday boy H.H. Holmes as America's first serial killer. That's just advertising. He wasn't even really the first one in Chicago. Then Sunday, a week from today, same bat time, same bat channel, unsolved mysteries from Chicago history, some of which we actually covered today and we'll cover in a bit more detail. Of course, we do mini tours over on the Facebook page every day at 10 a.m. We'll be doing a couple more of them later. And Fridays on this at 6:30 on the Patty Vasquez Show is a show called Whiskey and a Cookie, in which we drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. So, I know you guys wanted to see some more Miles while you were here. This is the first time Miles hasn't made a personal appearance on one of my tours. But here he is when he was just a little guy, playing fetch with Professor Mustache. Now, should you be in need of a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, t-shirt, hoodie, you can be cool like Luca is here. Go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. That'll hook you up for all of your Mysterious Chicago logo needs. Yesterday, Sarah wore one to the statue dedication. I think that might be the first time I've seen a Mysterious Chicago shirt out in the wild. I think some of you have worn them when I've run into you before, but that was really cool to see people show up in a shirt like that for the ceremony yesterday. But once again, I'm going to make it a short post-tour hang, as I'm hanging out at a friend's house right now. But for now, we are going to put Father Earl Hines back on and just hang out for a bit. Thanks for joining me, everybody.
On Chicago's South Side, where the couples are gaily dancing here in the cool atmosphere to this jive of...
Now, he still has Professor Mustache, but if I toss him, it was like, I already beat this guy.
The Roy Harris saying, now it can be told.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Gary. This is a QR code for Cash App here. I noticed when I got up this morning, Jessica and Jeff have an embroidered QR code up on their mantle. So I scanned it and it led to a video of Rick Astley. I got Rickrolled. I got embroidery Rickrolled this morning. I can hear you chuckling over there. But well done. Thanks, Susan. And thanks, Sue and Kelly.
Every other tale of boy meets girl is just an imitation. The great love story has never been told before. But now
Oh, and if you didn't see it before, this is some clips from yesterday's ceremony that was put up on the City of Johnston page. It's me and Jerry, his previous owner, unmasking the naked Trike-Angel statue. And that's what my hair looked like in the back. Just the other day. Thanks, Gina. Thanks for coming out again. Hey, Phoenix. Will I do an Oakwoods tour part 2? Probably so, yeah. Yeah, Liz, with any cemetery tours, there's tens of thousands of people there. Lynn, some bodies were moved here from, certainly some were moved from the Old City Cemetery. The removals were still going on when burials started here. Also, there was the mass grave of the guys from Camp Douglas that were supposed to be moved. They were supposed to spend a year moving those bodies, though, and only worked on it for about a month. It's entirely possible that a lot of them, the grave robbers, had beaten them to the punch. Heidi, this is at 67th and Cottage Grove in Chicago. Oh, when the cleanup is going to be October 3rd. If you go to the Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club Facebook page, they'll probably, I'm sure there will be a link. That's October 3rd. Octavio, yeah, been there. I actually have. Hey, Karen. Hey, Sarah. Thanks. Hey, this music is Earl Hines live at the Grand Terrace Cafe, which is now a beauty shop on 35th Street, but still has the old mural. You know, unnamed person with a H.H. Holmes icon over on YouTube. Hey, Betsy, thanks. I will be very safe. Yeah, there's a few things I need to check out at Burr Oak, Eleanor. Like the Chicken Man is at Burr Oak. Yes, I could hear that. I can understand that. Deborah, yeah, I'm intending to keep doing virtual tours. I may not do them at the same frequency, like every day plus 2 major ones a week, but we'll still be doing them. Phyllis, there should be a recording of the speech over on the videos section, because it was live streamed yesterday. Kathleen, it was the Grand Terrace, formerly known as the Sunset, which for years was an Ace Hardware. It's now a beauty shop at 35th, like the 301 block at 35th. But the mural is still in there. We covered it on the Bronzeville tour the other day. Octavio, yep, we're all set for the Patreon in-person tour. If you're on the... Yeah, but I'm still working on paperwork with my business license for the city so I can actually sell tickets to tours again. But for now, we've got the people on Patreon, so there is going to be, just to test the waters back out next Saturday for the $20 tier on the Patreon. I said, hey, who wants to come? So, Tim, the first live tour will be on Saturday for the Patreon members. And then hopefully, if I don't get the business license paperwork through soon, I'm just going to find somebody else with a business license to partner with. And since the PayPal and Venmo thing, the numbers have definitely gone down here. And also, you know, people are doing other stuff besides virtual tours these days. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, but I probably won't live stream the first in-person one. We'll see. Kathy, I'm not sure they've done too much on the dedication of the city of Johnston. If you go to the Mysterious Chicago Facebook videos page, that should be there. And Laura, you know, I'll probably like at least put up a little bit on the in-person tour. But there will be plenty more in-person tours coming up. Some of you guys have accumulated a number of free tickets on the Patreon. Thank you, Lisa. Toya, well, don't worry. I'm gonna log off in just a couple of minutes. It's gonna be a shorter in-person one. Most of the first in-person ones we'll probably do in a bunch of Graceland. I got to email Rose Hill. They're always they get a lot of emails from white pride types who get mad that I dance on Wilbur F. Story's grave. So. Kathleen, I should have some going by then. We can also do stuff like architecture of mysterious Chicago. I'm gonna start doing walking again. I gotta put together what I've got in the darker side of Taylor Street. Start going back through what my tours were. Oh, Grave Robbing 101. We could totally do Grave Robbing 101 again. Rob, I'd have to check my footage. I'm not sure. I think it might just be for maintenance. An Oakwood future date in mind? Not yet. Now, I haven't really put together a walking tour route there, which is very different than a virtual tour route. Bob, absolutely bring a camera on Saturday. Octavio, that section of the cemetery is not run by Dignity Memorial. There's not really anybody in charge of cleaning that portion of it. Toya, it should be on YouTube. And usually it'll at least be on the Mysterious Chicago Facebook videos page, just like 5 minutes after we're done.
A little bit of effervescent jive, bouncing along with the old favorite Catherine Perry to sing "A Tisket a Tasket."
Okay, here's the one problem with using this recording is this song, "A Tisket a Tasket," and it's not even Ella singing. It's not that great a song, no matter who sings it. Maybe I'll make up some parody lyrics to sing along with. Have a good day, Ava. Oh, Tim, I mentioned there's a Louis Sullivan Jewel Box Bank in Grinnell. Yeah, Houdini, when I'm on the road and mobile live streaming, so far I can only do that reliably on Facebook Live.
Not a single thing. Peck, peck, pecking all around till he's fighting.
Now, Patty, in this case, there aren't really any heirs that anybody can identify for. The synagogues that control those sections don't have any members with ancestors buried there.
I think that I will die.
I see you, Bob. Tell you, I don't do much about WNIB old-time radio, but I've always had, I've always had stacks of old-time radio stuff. So one of my favorite things when I used to deliver pizza, one of my favorite things to listen to was old radio shows. Especially yours truly, Johnny Dollar, America's favorite insurance investigator with the action-packed expense account. This is so ridiculous. Thanks, Nancy.
Someone help me find my basket and make me happy again.
I don't know. Well, this song, now that I listen to it, a tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow basket. I don't know if she's talking about an actual yellow basket. Kathy, I am drinking my usual Starbucks drink, black coffee. Oh yeah, Johnny Dollar. It's this old radio show about an insurance investigator with the actions-packed expense account. Thanks, Julie. There's the sheer amount of old-time radio shows you can download for free is amazing. I was actually surprised that I couldn't find that night at the Granada Cafe. It's amazing how much of that, like compared to silent film, how much of old-time radio still exists and how easy it is to get. But alright, everybody, I told you it would be a kind of a short post-show hang. I always feel like I want to linger. I was like, the longer I stay, the more people are likely to donate. But I gotta be heading for another joint. But some point over the course of the afternoon, just watch for your alerts over on Facebook Live, because we are definitely going to be doing a couple of things on the way back. It's nice, good overcast lighting today. So we'll have a couple of cool mini tours along the way to break up my long and monotonous drive. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. One more quick plug for the upcoming events. Put those down, put this back up. Thursday night, Antique Serial Killers in Chicago History. Sunday, a week from today, Unsolved Mysteries in Chicago History. And later on today, on the way back, some cool stuff from in between Des Moines and Chicago, besides just the Mississippi River. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. Thanks to Jeff and Jessica for hosting me in their house today. And until next time, until I see you guys later, make sure to stay safe, stay strong, stay warm, stay dry, stay healthy, stay happy, stay hungry. And of course, stay spooky.